Hey explorers, welcome back. We are still journeying west today. And last lesson, I can't talk, guys. Lewis and Clark spent the winter with the Mandan and the Hidatsa tribes, which were friendly tribes, and that they helped them out. They were both helpful to each other. And they met Sacagawea. And Sacagawea, they decided, was such a great person to have with them that they hired her to be a guide into the land because she knew all the land, and a translator because she could speak the languages. So, and remember, she had a little baby too. So today we're going to read some more about the discoveries they make on their expedition. So we're going to listen and find out what Lewis and Clark discover and how they keep track of what they discover, okay? But before we start that, we need to talk about our vocabulary words. Hibernated, sleep for the winter. The bears hibernated in the cave. Journals, books kept to take down or record what happens on a daily basis, similar to diaries. For school, Guy and Pierce kept track of what they ate every day in their food journals. Overturned, flipped upside down. The cat overturned the bowl of water. Record, to write down information as a way of remembering or sharing. During the meeting, Gwen used a notepad to record the information. And toppled, fell forward. The box of cards toppled down the stairs. All right, so now we're ready to go into the wilderness of the West with Lewis and Clark some more. So here we go. After Lewis and Clark sent some of the team back east with reports and scientific samples for President Jefferson, the captains and the rest of their crew continued west. They rowed in 2 of their original pirogues, plus 6 new canoes made from hollowed out trees. These canoes, about 30 feet long and 3 feet wide, were hard to balance. More than once, as the men were getting used to them, canoes overturned or turned sideways in mid-river, forcing the men to fish out wet supplies before going on. The men had to get all their supplies out of the water because the boats flipped over and the water fell in the water, and then all the supplies fell in. So they had to get all their supplies, get the boat turned back over, and get their supplies back in the water. It's a lot of work. Despite this, Lewis wrote in his journal that the men were happy and healthy. I don't know if I'd be happy if I flipped in the water. Soon they left behind the flat plains and entered hilly land. Now the Missouri River became more difficult to travel. Forests of western red cedars lined the banks of the river. These beautiful trees were so important to the Native Americans of that area that some of the Native Americans called themselves the people of the Red Cedar, performing special ceremonies before chopping down the huge evergreens. So an evergreen tree remains green all year long. Wow, look at that. Lewis and Clark knew it would be impossible to take an entire tree back with them because of its gigantic size, almost 200 feet above the ground. That's as tall as a 20-story building. Nevertheless, the tree was so important to the lives of the Native Americans that they knew they must gather samples and record or take notes about its many uses. They drew pictures and collected branches, cones, and seeds. As they learned more about the western red cedar from the Native Americans in the area, both Lewis and Clark wrote about the importance of western red cedar in their journals. So remember, they're keeping notes in this little book to send back information. The people and animals of the Northwest relied upon the tree for their existence. The Native Americans used the bark of the tree to weave mats, baskets, and clothing, and used the wood to build canoes. Elk ate the leaves and shoots of the enormous trees. Bears hibernated or slept through the winter in hollow cedar logs. So if you look at our picture, you can see that man is laying inside the tree where they're cutting it down. Now, I'm not sure that I would be brave enough to get inside where he's laying, but can you imagine, like, that's a grown man. He's laying inside the trunk and he's not even fully across it. So that's a huge, huge tree. The men heard often of the bears called grizzly bears that made their homes in the hollowed out logs of the cedars. So as they made their way up the Missouri, William Clark warned, keep a sharp eye out for grizzly bears. So this is a grizzly bear. Okay, we don't have grizzly bears in our area. We have black bears in our area. Now these are very, very common in our area because of the Appalachian Mountains. We see them up in like Cades Cove and up in the mountains and the Smokies and stuff. But these bears are mature. So why would they say keep a sharp eye out? Because they're big and they're dangerous. One of the hunters said, "Don't worry, Captain. We've seen plenty of bears before back in Kentucky. Black bears, yes. Grizzly bears, no. From what I hear, it's like the difference between a house cat and a lion." So does Captain Clark think that grizzly bears are like black bears? No. So he's saying that one is much smaller and probably nicer than the other. Either way, I'm not getting close to either one of them. They're cute and they're pretty, but they're cute and pretty from a distance. Don't go near them. One day, Lewis and another man were out hunting along the riverbank. Suddenly, they saw two giant grizzly bears up ahead. The bears rose up on their hind legs, up and up, until they stood 8 feet tall. Whew. Then, roaring, the bears charged. Raising their rifles and taking careful aim, Lewis and his companion, his friend, shot one bear, but the other one kept coming right at them with frightening speed. "Run!" shouted Lewis, and the two men turned and ran for their lives. Lewis and the other man stopped running to take another shot, turned, took aim, and fired at the same instant. The loud bang was followed by a tense moment as the bear suddenly stopped running. He held still for a moment, and then it toppled over, so it fell over. Only when they were sure that the grizzly bear was dead did Lewis and his companion carefully approach the animal. Lewis later wrote in his journal that the bear weighed between 500 and 600 pounds and was 8.5 feet tall. That's taller than 2 first graders, one standing on top of the other. It's pretty tall. After this frightening chase, Lewis told the whole party, "From now on, we must always move about and do even the simplest actions in parties or groups of 2 or more. One man alone going up against a grizzly would not stand a chance." All right, friends, so we're going to stop there today and let's talk about what we've learned so far. So, which task or tasks did Lewis and Clark accomplish in this story today? They discovered a new plant, the red cedar tree, and a new animal, the grizzly bear. They discovered that one a little scarily. So, what was the one plant that Lewis discovered, or Lewis and Clark discovered? I just said it, the red cedar. So describe to me the red cedar. Very tall, has little needles like a pine tree, and it's an evergreen tree, meaning it's green all the time. Could Lewis and Clark bring a red back with them? No, it's too big. What did they decide to do instead? They drew pictures, collected cones and branches. What was the animal that Lewis and Clark discovered? The grizzly bear. How are the grizzly bear and the black bear the same? They're both bears. How are they different? A black bear is smaller and black. The grizzly bear is brown and much bigger. Remember, we said it was between 500 and 600 pounds and like 8 feet tall. That's a lot. Why did Lewis tell the group they must do things in parties of 2 or more? Because the dangers of the grizzly bear. They didn't want them to get hurt, did they? All right, friends, now it's your turn to go answer your questions in Google Classroom. So make sure you answer all the questions. Remember, I just went over them all. Should have no reason why you can't answer them. Make sure you turn it into me, and I'll see you guys on our next lesson when we talk about rivers and mountains. Bye, friends.